Welcome to Remix EQ Live, where we are amplifying equity with a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. I'm your host, Dr. Erica Tate, and today I am broadcasting live from Savannah, Georgia, where I live. For those joining us today, please drop a greeting of choice in the comments. Let us know where you are joining from and the equity driven work you do or aspire to do. And remember, Remix EQ Live is an experience that's meant to be shared. So I encourage you to hit the share and invite buttons and bring along your people, your network, your family, your friends, your peeps, and join our Remix EQ Live community today. This season, we are broadcasting live on LinkedIn and YouTube. We can now connect more broadly, growing our reach and building our learning community. And while those comments are flowing in and those invitations are flowing out, I want to remind you that Remix EQ Live offers the opportunity for us to connect and build community with each other around the equity driven and justice driven work being performed throughout the world. And we do this by centering the work. That is, our guests and our viewers share examples of what they do in their role or position as a way to illustrate the innovative, effective, and meaningful ways they advance equity in the spaces in which they live, learn, work, and play. So, throughout the show and in the comments, I invite you to also share what you do to make the world a more just place. We are midway through season 7, and this 51st Remix EQ Live episode features Dr. Janelle Williams, the co founder and CEO of Kindred Futures, a catalytic change agent committed to closing the racial wealth gap. Dr. Williams is a visionary strategist and, of course, a social justice warrior. And today we will listen and learn from her about how and why she pursues economic justice for Black communities in the American South. That's right, the dirty, y'all. Dr. Williams will drop knowledge about what it means to build Black wealth with and for each other, and listen carefully to the language she uses to describe how historical systemic racism has constructed barriers to wealth building over generations in Black communities. And as she speaks about Kindred Futures approaches to increasing economic opportunities and pathways to wealth, you'll be inspired by her leadership, which emphasizes strategic partnerships and collective efforts. So, whether you're trying to make it rain and get your coins or secure the bag for yourself and loved ones, this episode is sure to yield a high return on investment. So, listen, let us begin this conversation for change. Welcome, Dr. Janelle Williams.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Tate. I have to say the energy, the enthusiasm, is so inspiring and it's encouraging. I wish that you could, be with at all my speaking engagements. Exactly. It's a wonderful way to kick off a Friday. But thank you so much for inviting me to really participate in Remix broader campaign and platform, amplifying just the power of solidarity and the importance of advancing economic justice with intent, eyes on the prize, always to freedom.
Yes, well, thank you. We are so glad you're here. So, I want to start us off. I just want to invite you to introduce yourself. And as
Um,
you do, please share 1 to 2 career or personal twists and turns that have
yeah.
led you into your current role.
Yeah, thank you so much again for the invitation. So I always start by saying I am a daughter of the diaspora, and that's a really important identity for me, um, because when we think about just the power and the connectivity of the diaspora and all the potential that it holds, I'm not surprised that my life's mission is deeply embedded in a return home, a return to an acknowledgement of all the things that we aspire to collectively achieve, and a real celebration and acknowledgement of those who paved the way for us to be there. I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm proud to be Trini to the bone. Lived in the American South for more than half of my life and consider Atlanta, Georgia home now, where I've been for almost 20 years. You know, I really started this journey, which never really was like a career. It really was a journey. Um, as a community organizer in Trinidad and Tobago around HIV/AIDS, really applying a faith based approach. And I will say community organizing, I am so thankful for the opportunity because it paved the way to really create the architect of how I want and should engage in this world. And what was my purpose and my mission? And my purpose and my mission, then I am thankful it was then orchestrated into a career. It was really grounded by purpose and mission. And being a community organizer, I'm a proud mom of a soon to be 14-year-old. And when she asks, like, Mommy, what do you do? I still say to her to this day, I'm an organizer, right? Because it's really about mobilizing resources to support people and places who've been consistently pushed to the economic fringes. So, being a daughter of the diaspora, coming from Trinidad and Tobago, I'm a proud first generation high school graduate, a daughter of parents who experienced independence in their lifetime. Trinidad was one of the seasoning colonies during slavery. And so when I think about the work that we do right now and why we do the work, it's because when we think about what we're pursuing and what's the purpose, it's really, securing the bag, having financial stability, creating intergenerational wealth, facilitating community wealth building opportunities. It's actually anchored in a deeper commitment to freedom. And that's fundamentally what freedom is. Freedom and power is really focused on the ability to determine your reality. And so I'm so thankful. A few years ago, Tane Trailer and I co founded this organization that was actually um, and there's a whole story around our origin story, which we have it on our podcast if you're interested in. But it was really birthed out of failure, if I would be honest. We were in philanthropy, and we were seeing every year we were giving out millions in investments, and we didn't think we were moving the needle. Atlanta continued to lead in income inequality and economic immobility. And what wasn't the headline is that it was deeply racialized. And so we did something really different. We invited our grantees to audit us and tell us how we are missing the mark, how we need to move the needle. And it's so important when we think about purpose to lean into like authenticity, right? And authenticity demands a deviation sometimes from the prescriptive path. Freedom requires a deviation from the prescribed path. And in doing that, which is really vulnerable, but to invite your grantees and partners to audit you, they gave birth to challenge us to create an organization that sits at the intersection of racial and economic justice. And I always say, so this work was birthed out of failure because we were not moving the needle the way we wanted to see it. It was birthed with intentionality and purpose, and it was birthed from authentic demand, right? And so, really excited about the work that we do at Kindred Futures, and I'm excited. I'll share more about why we think it's a national crisis to address the racial wealth divide more intentionally. What's important to build collective Black wealth with a pronounced emphasis on the American South. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so great to like learn that you were a community organizer, and I think that our community will definitely see that as she speaks about the work. Like you can totally tell that you're grounded in that, the way that you bring people together, and I love the story you're sharing about being born out of failure, the work that you're doing, or and that you invited people to give feedback, and
Yeah.
you use that feedback to give birth to what we're going to talk about here today. And so, this is great.
I just say on that point, it's so interesting because if you look at the VC world, um, like failure is actually encouraged. Failure is like fail fast and fail forward. But in our communities, we are conditioned to be so performative and
Right.
to actually be frantically treading water, right? While we're trying to keep things moving above the surface. And it's harmful to our health. It's
Mhm.
actually not helpful to our communities, and it compromises our leadership. And so I think there's a lot of freedom and embracing, like, there is spaciousness to acknowledge what's not working, to create space for what can work, and to really celebrate that, because we deserve the right to fail, to innovate, to expand, to refine, right? This is a journey. And when you are dealing with deeply enduring systems that are focused on sustaining oppression, you have to be prepared to rapidly prototype, right? And you have to be prepared to do that in community and not always get it right. So I just wanted to name that and lift that up, because in other spaces, failure is not only acknowledged, it's appreciated and rewarded through through sound investments to allow you to experiment again.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. We have some comments coming in. We have Regine. She says, "Good morning, Dr. Tate and Dr. Williams. I hope everyone is having an amazing Friday. Looking forward to learning and being inspired. It's already happening, Regine." And then we have another user on LinkedIn who's saying, "Happy Friday." Yes, this is going to be a wonderful Friday. We have removed the fear of failure. We are going to rapidly prototype, which is like one of my favorite phrases. So I'm very excited for us to do this work. For those who are just joining us, this is Remix EQ Live. We are amplifying equity through a remix of information, interviews, and inspiration. And now that you've had the chance to meet or reconnect with Dr. Janelle Williams, I know you are inviting others to tune in. And of course, I invite you to interact with us. So please post comments, even if it's just to say hello, that you are in this space. We welcome you. Be sure to ask questions, share any examples and learnings as we dive into this interview, because you are part of our Remix EQ Live experience. So now we're going to center the work. This is an opportunity for us to learn from Dr. Williams about how she makes the world a more just place, specifically her regional approach for how she works toward economic justice by building Black wealth in the American South. And before we dive in, I wanted to create space for Dr. Williams to provide additional context for her work. So we've learned a bit about the twists and turns and how failure led her to this wonderful work that she's doing, an impactful work. When we think about, I was thinking about when she was saying rapid prototyping, but when we think about changing our pathways, right, it always offers us this opportunity for more clarity, right, and thinking about how we might refine, as you said, the ways that we pursue economic justice for Black people. So recently, Dr. Williams' organization celebrated a change, a rebrand, from which Kindred futures emerge. So, Janelle, why did your organization undergo a rebrand, and how has it changed your approach to building Black wealth?
Yeah. Um, Thank you for that question. So nationally, I just want to offer some context about where we are at in terms of the state of Black wealth in America. When we think about the state of Black wealth and we look at median household wealth for Asian American households or is 525,000 on average. For white American households, 282,000. For Latinx households, we're at 66,000. They're at 66,000. When we look at Black households, it's 42,000, right? And so when we think about the median household wealth, just that sole indicator, we see that black median wealth trails other racial ethnic groups. And it was really important, Federal Reserve came out, they released this data periodically. And one of the things they said on the last release was that we did actually see a 66% increase in Black median household wealth. But the dollar gap between white wealth and black wealth is the highest it has ever been since they started recording this data. It is the highest it has ever been since they started recording this data. This is a crisis. This is a crisis. And so, one, it calls for several things. One, we have to really think about and really unpack what do we mean when we talk about wealth. And so, I work at Kindred. We've released a framework, Structural Determinants of Black Wealth, which looks at wealth as an interdisciplinary outcome because it actually is, right? So, we look at four core domains. We look at finance, health, democracy, and climate, and how these core domains and indicators, variables within these domains interact in a very dynamic way to produce these outcomes. So that's something really important. We also think about, for us, while I share data around the wealth divide, we also know wealth is not stagnant. Wealth will continue to grow. And because wealth will continue to grow, they're projecting by 2053, Black households will actually have zero negative net worth on average, right? Because think about how as wealth isn't stagnant as it grows, it makes sense actually that the dollar gap is also increasing because the divide is so large. So our work is really anchored with intentionality around let's think about how we focus on the people and places that need to build collective Black wealth, right? And when we look at the people, we see Black median household wealth trails all other racial ethnic groups. So we need to look at Black wealth. And when we look at the places, we see 56% of Black people in America live in the American South. 56%. So it's important for us to think about what's the role of the South. And when you look at the history of development, of segregated economies, segregated educational systems, it is so deeply pronounced in the American South. And there is a consistent practice of extractive development in the South, which has been documented time and time again in several research studies. So we started to really think about, okay, let's really unpack what we're seeing in the South. And so we started to run some analysis, and we saw that there were 2 million Black households, which is a very conservative estimate still. 2 million Black households in the American South with zero negative net worth, right? This is a crisis. When I think about 2 million households, you're looking at the entire state of Montana, Wyoming, and Nevada on average, right? Roughly. When you think about 2 million people living in the American South with zero negative net worth. And so this really, the data really challenged us around really leading with some intentionality and specificity. The data also told us that, you could live in places that have high concentrations, a high density of millionaires and Black millionaires, but that doesn't necessarily translate into moving the mean for everyone. And we see that. I'm in Atlanta, which is considered one of the premier Black meccas in the country, but yet the Black white wealth divide in Atlanta is 46-1. 46-1. So the data also told us like we have to look at how do we think about investing in the collective and not just in outliers. So that's an important part of our work. And then data is important, but community will always be your integrity check. And we really needed to see, is there an authentic demand for this work? And we have been really so thankful, and quite frankly, it's been validating that partners across the South, organizations doing a range of issues, right? Either showing up as researchers, activists, organizers, advocates, practitioners, all really interested in saying we need to talk about this as a regional issue here. And so we really, when we saw, okay, there's this authentic demand that's being generated to replicate some of our work, it really gave traction to that. And so when we think about all these factors combined, it was time for us to rebrand, to reflect an organization where we were not defined by geography, but we are defined by intentionality. It also is an organization in our name. Kindred Futures is always also thinking about forward looking. So we always want to lead with solutions, but also we're doing this in community. And so this Kindred Futures is not just about an organization, it's actually an invitation to a broader movement with partners who are mission aligned to really advance economies that work for all in the American South.
Yeah. Thank you so much for laying out how you came to focus on Black people in the American South, like the data that you use in thinking about like authentic demand. Do people want and need, like need and want, right?
Yes,
Want this work. It's really helpful because there are so many angles to address equity and justice in the work that we do. And I think it's really important um, to name and clarify and explain like why you're focusing on a particular population, what the need is for that. Not necessarily to justify the work because this work is necessary, but it does help people understand how you're approaching it and why you will be seeking the solutions that we'll talk about later. But I love that, and I love the name. I love business names that really project like what you
yes, your
not like.
ethos.
Yeah, not just saying what you want to come, but like we're here to work together, right?
That's right, right.
To
That's
the
right.
journey. Yeah. So thank you so much. This really is an excellent backdrop to our rest of our conversation. So, Dr. Williams, you are the co-founder and chief executive officer of Kindred Futures. So, how do you like you told us a little bit about like the work that you're doing, but how do you pursue it? Like, what guides your pursuit of economic justice in Black communities in the American South?
Yeah. So I'm always excited to talk about what is our working theory of change, right? And what is our working hypothesis. And so let me start though with a headline or a description of like, explain why we do what we do. Now, like, let's talk about what we do. And so Kindred Futures is a think and do tank operating as a solutions aggregator that partners with Blackwell solution providers to influence capital movers. Those are really clunky terms, right? So I'm going to spend some time unpacking this, right? What it means to be a think and do tank, what it means to be a solutions aggregator, partnering with Blackwell solution providers, and influencing capital movers. That happens through a working hypothesis. If you build, lead, and invest with partners to address this population level outcome for us, which is 2 million Black households, we will see an increase in collective Black wealth. What does it mean to build? Building for us has several layers. We are really committed to building the resiliency of the ecosystem. When we think about the South and we think about um, investments, one of the things you consistently hear is what's the capital absorption rate? What's the infrastructure? And so for us, it's really important to bolster the resiliency of our service providers, of our intermediaries, of our entities that are working as Blackwell solution providers. One example where we do this is through our work with business serving organizations. To date, we have 27 strategic partnerships across the state of Georgia working with business serving organizations that support Black businesses and small businesses. And so our work is to support these organizations to provide targeted, cutting edge technical assistance so that they have access to cutting edge resources around procurement, capital readiness, finance, technology, data management systems, and infrastructures, right? And through their collective partnerships, we're able to support 15,000 Black businesses across the state. It's really important as we think about the end user that we make sure we bolster the capacity of organizations that are working with those end users. And unfortunately, sometimes within the nonprofit sector, we do not invest enough in making sure service providers are getting the resources to do their work. So they're not running on an analog system while the rest of the world is HD. And so we want to make sure we address that gap, particularly for people working as Blackwell solution providers. We're also building um, community and networks to really think about shared results agenda. No one organization can singularly address issues that are over 400 years old, right? We have to do this work in partnership. So our work is also rooted in a spirit of abundance, and we operationalize that by adopting a shared results agenda and really leading on an equitable pathway framework. We're building evidence as well on emerging prototypes that we think will be ready to take to scale, to take to markets. And so some of these emerging prototypes for us is stuff like a shared ownership models, really looking at ownership models in industries where we know there is a high demand and the demand will continue to grow in our future economy. Then we have our lead work. Our lead work is around policy and research. So we spend a lot of time describing the issues, analyzing the issues, understanding the nuance of these issues, because we want to always bring solutions to address these issues. At the end of the day, the systems are operating the way they were designed to operate. So we have to tackle root causes. For us, going to scale means getting market and public sector intervention and adoption to take to scale. And so we have a dynamic policy agenda. It's a really a dynamic framework, which really focuses on policy solutions that really emphasize revenue, resilience, and repair for Black communities. And so we have a range of policy areas that, again, address the interdisciplinary nature of wealth, right? And so we have policy priorities that look at baby bonds, look at really addressing predatory actors that particularly target communities of color. We also have policy and research um, topics that really understand that race explicit work is not race exclusive work. And so, really, even when we think about the role of Black businesses actually, we've seen in our data, Black businesses support and improve child well being outcomes for all children, regardless of race. And so, we're leveraging those data points to really think about inclusive development and alternative economic models that could be sustainable for local economies. And so, really leading with those solutions and being a solutions aggregator is how we show up in as policy and research space at the local and state level. And then finally, it's about investing. Wealth begets wealth. And so, if we really want to move those outcomes, we have to influence capital movers. So, how do we show up as a capital broker? We also are an intermediary, so we redeploy dollars through strategic partnerships. But we also want to make sure our policy and research is adopted so that it can influence investments. And to date, we're really thankful that our policy, our research, and our practices have supported over 87 million in investments in Atlanta to support our small business ecosystem. We did not provide those resources, but our research influenced capital movers to deploy those resources into the communities that needed them.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing the build, lead, invest model and providing examples of how that works. And we love to add different examples on this show and in our community, like to our knowledge bank, right? Because it helps us when we see solutions happening in one space, right? It can help us think about how we can transfer that or adapt that to our communities. And so you have so much that is happening in a beautiful way. I did want to take time. You talked about your research and policy agenda, and so I wanted to share with the world that you have many policy briefs, but there's one that just recently came out that's Trapped by Design: How Predatory Lenders Exploit Black Atlanta. So please. dig in and read. And then the other one, which you referred to earlier, Building a Beloved Economy, a baseline and framework for building Black wealth in Atlanta, that really, when she was talking about those interdisciplinary way of viewing Black wealth. So I just wanted to make sure that people have those on their screen, and we'll also drop them in the comments. But these are, I always think like the artifacts of the work that you're doing, so that we can see. And I had a chance to read both of them. They are data filled. They are very informative, both historically and current. And so I think they are wonderful resources for anyone doing this work, or anyone trying to think about how to explain the Black wealth gap.
Yes.
In this interdisciplinary way in their community. It uses a lot of public data that's available. And so if you're looking for like, I just don't know how to show evidence of this, these are examples. Use them and think about how you can, find that data for your local community. So thank you for that. I did have a question about the investments. So 85 million, or 87 million in cash flows. Could you share an example so we could visualize what like this work looks like? Like even though you're not giving the money, you're informing how that money is used. So what's an example of a project that shows us like how that investment happened and who benefited?
Yeah. So we partnered with several entities. And this one predated me, but I thought it was such a powerful win to really look at capital flows into small businesses. And what the study illuminated was the missing middle. So many times when you talk about Black businesses, there's always skewed to like startups or like unicorns, right? But like there is a missing middle, which is like 250 plus revenue, but shy of a million. And they're like stuck in this space where they're ready to really like they want to scale in a way in a way beyond those revenue projections. And so when we did a study looking at capital flows, we realized that there weren't we were missing um these particular these particular small businesses, and it was small businesses across the board, and that we needed to think about creating product offerings for these missing middle, and really think about how we're targeting the missing middle. And so socializing that research across multiple sectors, philanthropic partners came together to really create a fund to support the missing middle. And so those are some of the examples of how our research is taken up and activated in partnership with others to influence capital movers like philanthropy, like public systems, and even private sector champions.
Thank you so much. I appreciate these examples. I want to say hello to Kim Addy. She says, hello, Dr. Tate and Dr. Williams. Thank you for joining us. You look so happy.
Always happy. Hi, Kim.
I love the profile pics. I feel like I'm meeting you.
Yes.
Well, thank you. So for those who tune in to Remix EQ Live on a regular basis, you know that our learning community, we celebrate the work and the works of our guests. And works are what our guests produce for others: books, talks, online content, card decks, performances, articles. We've had it all in talk shows. And so we've already discussed Kindred Futures research and policy agenda and the briefs that they have shared. And those are works worth celebrating because, as you can see, they're informing and inspiring community change with partnerships, policy, and funding. So we love that. And today we also wanted to celebrate Kindred Futures podcast, Black Wealth Unlocked, which explores and celebrates the power of Black wealth. Thought leaders, financial experts, community activists share stories, insights, and strategies for building and unlocking economic prosperity within the Black community. So, yeah. Dr. Williams, you do so many things through Kindred Futures. Why do you also have launched the Kindred Futures Black Wealth Unlocked podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think it was important for us to have a podcast, which is seasonal. It's not like consistently. We usually do it in the fall and winter. It was really important for us to create a platform to offer some nuance to the narrative around Black wealth that was data informed, but also interrogate traditional lenses of like what wealth should look like, what it means, and highlight very much like what you're doing, Dr. T, champions, leaders, advocates in this space who really are um, leading with a commitment to think about this as a movement, as really a focus on the collective, the sum of us, and not exclusively about a celebration of our outliers and our success stories. We want to celebrate our success stories. We need those success stories, but we also have to address the systemic and enduring issues that creates odds that cause success stories, right? And so that was the reason why we wanted to do that. I'll also say, as someone who comes from a strong data research background, I've had my own like appreciate awakening and appreciation for narrative. And I will say, while we do work around policy and research and um, practices around ecosystem building, the reality is this work is about changing hearts more than it is about changing minds. And I could give you a lot of data, but if your heart does not see my humanity, that data does not move you. And so it's really about creating space for conversations um, that changes narratives and that humanizes what people are truly experiencing in this country on a day-to-day basis, right? And it should be harder. It should be harder to deny someone's humanity, to deny someone's right for dignity. And so creating spaces to have more nuanced conversations around what Black wealth looks like, your understanding of community wealth building principles, really layering stories to anchor this work in our humanity is important. And then really partnering with groups like yours, where this is really around how do we shift narratives and really think about a narrative campaign to have a different type of conversation, to invite people to dream in a much more dynamic, in a much more enduring way, sustainable way that goes beyond how does me and mine thrive, but how is the sum of us? How are we and the collective we Ubuntu better off as a result of a shared commitment and investment in sowing into this movement? And so we're excited about opportunities to partner with others to continue creating our own narratives, because the narrative holds the power and we need to tell our own stories.
That's right. Yeah, thank you so much. I love it. I love Right. I just, yeah, like storytelling as a way of humanizing, um, so that others can get on board with this work. It's really beautiful. I am going to drop in the comments just a little taste of the rich conversations and storytelling that happens during the Black Wealth Unlocked podcast. The recent episode, Why the South Matters, featuring Dr. Williams, who is interviewing economic justice activist Jessica Norwood, and Savannah's own Dr. Alicia M. Johnson, who is a health and human service leader. And she was also a guest on our inaugural season of Remix EQ Live. So, we have to shout her out. We love all the work she
Great.
does. So definitely continue to tune in. Subscribe to and follow Kindred Futures YouTube channel, and listen and watch the Black Wealth Unlocked podcast. We want to amplify Dr. Williams and Kindred Futures and their guests and all the work that they're doing as a collective, and we really want to amplify their works. So, Dr. Williams, you share so many examples about how Kindred Futures is fulfilling its promise statement, redefining wealth so that Black people have the opportunity to contribute to and accelerate a just and inclusive economy. How do you, Kindred Futures, measure your progress in making good on this promise?
Yeah. So we are uh one of our core values is focus on impact. And so we're really focused on results. and we think about our results in realistic and ambitious ways, right? And so every person on our team is very clear about their individual contribution to the results. And so for us, it starts with, what we call a population level indicator. These 2 million Black households in the American South that currently have zero negative net worth. And starting with that 2 million Black households, we then think about what are the strategies that could reduce that number. And we look at our theory of change as an opportunity to look at those strategies, build, lead, and invest. When you think about it, build, lead, and invest, the then falls into, okay, what are we doing in our ecosystem building work to support Black wealth solution providers? And how are we seeing that translate into our end users? So if we look at the ecosystem building work I referenced before, we want to be able to see then end users, which for us are Black businesses, increase not just their revenue, but their profit margins. We want to see them increase wages that they currently pay to employees, increase jobs that could be hired, because we know nationally, well over 90% of Black businesses are still solopreneurs. And for some, that is by design. Some, they are ready to scale. And so, how do we make sure that they are partnered with entities that can support that scale journey? And so those are the metrics we look at when we think about our business serving organization spaces, right? For lead, for example, we lead with solutions. We offer a lot of research and policy tools and recommendations. But the success for us is adoption. So we want to see policies adopted, right? Practices adopted, both at the public sector or private sector. So we actually look at a policy adoption as our outcome. And so we track this. Now, some of these goals are really they're longer term, they're multi-year, right? And so we invite people to think about this is patient capital investment. Again, this is 400 years plus of brutal systemic racism that continues to show up in how our economy works. And so we need a patient capital investment to undo the harms this has created, but also provide alternative models that supports economies that work for all. And so when we think about investments, we look at how many dollars are we helping to facilitate, broker into our traditionally disinvested communities. We look at how other champions, whether they're in philanthropy or in other sectors, are adopting portfolios of or creating a portfolio of solutions to really bolster the capacity and the impact for our solution providers. So we look at our metrics in these in very dynamic but intentional ways, really leaning into this equitable pathway to results, which is a modified, like our performance management framework at Kindred is our results-based accountability, but it's amended into an equitable pathway to results framework to really make sure we're moving the needle. And in areas where, again, that needle takes a little longer, we have intermittent outputs that we're looking for to see, okay, we're moving in the right direction. And so it's constantly relentless focus on results to make sure we're doing the work that matters.
Yes, I can tell. My evaluator soul was just so excited as you were talking. I was like, yes. You love to see like a goal, break it down in a framework.
Yes.
So in each of the areas, you have your
Yes.
metrics, and it's really great. And also your note about being patient investors, right? Like this work takes a very long time because we're undoing.
Yes.
Um, right, of facts. And so what that looks like, being able to say what it would look like in the end, but having, like as you said, like those intermittent outputs. I mean, it's really great. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really important for people to hear how intentional and detailed you are about making sure results happen in this work. Because your work is, it's complex, right? There's so many factors, many are out of your control that are affecting the work that you're doing, but you're bringing some friendship.
And I will just add that, like this is what I'm sharing that's external, right? But then there's a corresponding like internal metrics around like, okay, so Janelle, what are you doing to contribute to these results, right? Which each person needs to know. And that's really important, especially in movement work. Movement work is soul work. And it is hard work. It is hard. It is toil. It's not just labor, it's toil, right? So it's really important that people see where their contribution in that toil, because it could feel so incremental. And so making sure that there's clarity for folks in the movement space to be able to see their contribution and celebrate the contribution of that toil to a broader result that's collective is important. And it's also important doing movement work to talk about shared outcomes, right? And so the 2 million households, that number will decline. It will not be exclusively because of Kindred. And this is why it's so important to talk about shared results and operating in a space of abundance so that we collectively work together on a mission that matters, that we can measure in a meaningful way.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing that and adding that exclamation point. Oh man, I love it. So every episode, our guests drop knowledge and inspiration, and you've done just that by sharing your stories of Kindred Futures policy work, partnerships, possibilities, your measurement framework. We love it. And I'd love for you to drop one last bit of inspiration on us. Dr. Janelle Williams, as you reflect on your work building wealth within the Black community, what are you most inspired by? And how is this inspiration influencing your next steps?
Yeah. You know, we are in, for our generation, this is our civil rights moment. And what I am inspired by is what our ancestors endured and still had enough left to pass on to us. I'm inspired that we have been weathered for solidarity. I'm inspired that we have been weathered in solidarity to always fight for justice. And so I see in this moment leaders coming together in such grounded ways to align our resources, align our align all our social capital, align our strategies, because we are focused on standing on the right side of history. And that inspires me. And that what is fueling us to do that is to know our ancestors who endured so much worse still kept something within them to pass on to us. And this is our moment to honor that in our generation and be prepared to pass it on to generations to come. So this inspires me that we will not let fear intimidate righteousness. We will not courage is not always screaming at the top of the room, but it's doing the right thing when no one is looking. And so we are committed to being um, strategic. We are committed to being to delivering impact, and we are committed to making sure when the history books are written that we it will be recorded correctly, and we know where we stand.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you for your commitment. I appreciate you. I love your call on the ancestors to push us forward in continuing this work. Well, thank you, Dr. Janelle Williams, for
So
accepting
much.
my invitation to speak on what matters most to you. It has been a pleasure being in conversation with you and having the opportunity to listen and learn from you about how and why you have chosen to make the world a more just place and how you will continue to do so. So thank you so much.
So
So
much. I really appreciate the invitation, and please continue to create spaces for us to share our joy, share our possibilities, and to continue to inspire each other. Thank you so much for what you're doing, Dr. Tate.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I just have a couple of reminders and then we're off. So we're here on the second and fourth Fridays at 11:30 a.m. So coming up this season, we're going to be in conversation with Dr. Kindred Jackson, who is an obstetrician, gynecologist committed to improving Black maternal health. Locally in Savannah, Georgia. And then we are also going to welcome back CHC, Creating Healthier Communities, which is a national nonprofit that helps organizations achieve their mission by bringing communities, nonprofits, and businesses together. They were on our cervical cancer prevention show, and so they're going to come back, and then they're going to share about their Black Birthing Initiative in Georgia. And I'm very excited for our guests, and that will actually be broadcasting at the start of Black Maternal Health Week, which is April 11 through 17. The stars aligned. And then later, I'm sitting down with Andre M. Perry, who's a senior fellow at Brookings Metro, a director of Brookings Center for Community Uplift, and author of the books Black Power Scorecard, Measuring the Racial Gap and What We Can Do to Close It, and Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities. So we'll be discussing his latest book, Black Power Scorecard, and continuing the conversation we started today about closing the wealth gap and increasing collective powers. So please tune in on LinkedIn and YouTube, and also share and like our upcoming and past shows. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also, since this is season 7, we have created a substantial and inspiring body of work, 50 plus episodes, which we've curated into playlists for your viewing and listening pleasure. So if you enjoyed Dr. Janelle Williams and all that she spoke about today, be sure to check out the following Remix EQ Live playlist on the Blue Knowledge YouTube channel, the Entrepreneurship and Economic Empowerment playlist, of course, and also our Amplify Women playlist. We have nearly 40 women who are doing amazing things that we've talked to, and so be sure to check them out. I also invite you to view my recent TEDx talk entitled Building Community to Make the World a More Just Place, which is inspired by Remix EQ Live. Visit our website, learn more about our episodes, learn more, access our recordings, and also learn more about our amazing guests like Dr. Williams. And while you're there on the website, or if you are engaging in a little justice-oriented retail therapy, or if you're providing donation for the work that we do, I encourage you to check out my business, Blue Knowledge, which advances equity in schools and communities through collaborative research, inclusive evaluation, and equity-driven professional and community learning. So please connect with us on LinkedIn, the Blue Knowledge YouTube channel, and of course, if you're in Savannah, in the streets. Thank you, Remix EQ community, for your encouragement and your engagement, and of course, your rally, which is how we appreciate, learn, love, and take care of you as you work to make the world a more just place. I'm your host, Dr. Erica Tate, and this is Remix EQ Live, and we will see you next time.